Thank you to our earlier panel, also speakers. Some really useful stuff in there. What Donna and I wanted to concentrate on is some of the paper that you can't avoid. I thought about this really in the context of my own practice, which is a personal injury practice. Boy, it's busy out there with clients calling like crazy. How do we deal with them? It's not really busy, by the way, but if they call and when they call, how do you deal with them? How do you bring in a new client? That's something that I wanted to present today to let you know what it is that I came up with. And I've also got something that may have been shared with you by email already. I'll screen share it and I'll go through that very quickly. So my talk, my presentation really is about 5 to 10 minutes, something like that. Okay. So it's a pandemic. You have a phone that rings, and it is somebody that is interested in hiring you for, in my case, it would be a motor vehicle accident or whatever. You can't meet with them, or you don't want to meet with them, or they don't want to meet with you. What do you do? The initial contact with clients in ordinary times requires 3 things from my perspective. You have your meeting, and during that meeting, you need to identify the client because there are rules that require you to do so. Secondly, you need that client to sign on. In my case, it would be with a contingency fee agreement. So that's some paper that you need. And the third thing is a practical one. In order to get going with the file, I need authorizations from my clients so that I can send my request to their doctor or wherever to start gathering information that will help with the case that I'm representing them on. In times of pandemic, what I really hope to do is obviously transfer this stuff to electronic means, but I also want to make it as easy as possible for the client to follow along. I want as few speed bumps on the road as I possibly can. And this is particularly important when you're retaining a client because we're talking about first impressions here. You want to come across as professional and that you know what you're doing. So with that, let me see if I can figure out the screen share here. So again, this is my attempt to try and make things smooth and easy for clients. And you can draw on this as you see fit. One caveat, and that is that there's no such thing as an expert in working remotely during COVID. We don't have anybody with 10 or 15 or 20 years experience doing that. So we're all learning along the way. And I would encourage everybody to look at the resources that are available to them. One of the best resources that I've found is the Law Society website. If you go to it, there is a frequently asked questions link that you can't miss right in the front page, home page. Click on that because there's some really good advice in there. And further, there are some links to the various ministerial orders or notices to the profession or whatever. So keep that in mind. It's a great starting point. So I drew on that for this letter that you're seeing here. I've tried to do it up mostly in plain English with the goal of simplifying for the client as much as possible. So this first part of the letter, it's contemplating a video conference by Zoom. Some people have used it, others haven't. So for those that haven't, direct them to YouTube, great resource. Everyday resource where you can find a tutorial video that walks them through. And that's something that you'll see right in the first page of the letter, okay? Orienting the client to how we're doing it and where it is that they might be able to get some experience with the platform that we'll be using. In this example, it's Zoom. It could be whatever you want, but in this example, Zoom. This next paragraph, bottom of page 1, is a brief description of what I expect to happen during our video conference. The one thing that I want to highlight here is tell the client that, yeah, you'll be taking notes, And tell the client also that you may record parts of the video conference. The client identification in particular requires some screenshots. I'm thinking, sure, do the screenshots, but Zoom, and I'm sure other platforms, they have a little record button. So what I don't want you to do is record without the client knowing. Let them know when you are going to be recording if you choose to use that feature. And in this case, I've put it right in the letter. Next, we get into the forms, okay? But let me put that off for a second. I want to talk a little bit further about simplifying the process for the client, and that's why I'm skipping down here. In this section, I am now overlapping with something that you've already heard from Terry in particular. How are clients going to get the documents back to you, as well as other documents that you might need from time to time? So again, with the idea of keeping things simple, you'll see A, B, C in the middle of the page there. These are the three ways that you can get documents to us. But I'm expressing in this letter a preference for something aligned to a paperless office, which is send me a PDF. And right here, Office Lens is mentioned as one of the two apps that a client can use. Another one that he found, which is also pretty dead simple, is Adobe Scan. And once again, a couple of video tutorials so that someone can easily click on there and be walked through what needs to be done to get the documents to me. Okay, so I've hit the bookends of the letter at the beginning and the end. Next, let's go to the middle, the documents. This sample letter, I have appended documents so that I am sending by email the client one attachment. The stuff that I want them to sign and look at and so on, it's all down here. Consent, 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 contingency fee agreement with some commentary to follow. That's for you, not the client. Okay. So what are they going to do with this stuff? Make it dead simple. Give them explicit instructions. This is what you do. I need you to print 6 consents, 2 Alberta health consents, 2 also Alberta health consents, 1 contingency fee agreement. Why do they need to do this? Well, there's a paragraph at the top there, which I hope makes it easier for the client to understand why maybe I'm being a little more stodgy than what they might expect. What's the big deal here? I'm just signing some forms. Well, this is why we're doing it this way. It's because there are protocols, and it's because the integrity of the documents, it's important that they be maintained. So brief description in there. So when you get to the instructions, this is pretty straightforward. It tells them what to do. Print them. Do not sign them because I need to see you do so. Once they're signed, send me a single copy. The rest, throw in the mail. So top of page 3, all I'm doing there is facilitating the client identification stuff. When you have a new client, you need to make sure that we go through the protocols that help us prevent fraud. That's all written out in rules 118.1 to 118.11 of the rules for the Law Society. We're supposed to do this stuff every time. Now, when we're doing it by video conference, the Law Society has provided some guidelines that relax the requirement a little bit, or at least allow us to do so by video conference. So in prep for that, I'm telling the potential client, hey, have your driver's license ready or your passport. There's a third option, which is 2 reliable other documents. What I would suggest you all do is go to that frequently asked questions page on the Law Society website that I mentioned earlier. And on there, I'm not gonna screen share it because I guess I'm having quirks with that. One of the questions deals directly with how you identify a client during a video conference. Super helpful. That's what you want to do. Okay. So So far, I've touched upon release forms. I've touched upon the technology that we're hoping to use for the video conference with a client and for exchange of documents. I've shown you that there are instructions that I'm suggesting the client follow for the signing of the release forms. Well, what do you do about the contingency fee agreement? So here is a page, it's a placeholder for your contingency fee agreement. If you're going to have a new client sign a contingency fee agreement remotely, you have to keep in mind that the rules of court have a couple of specific rules that apply to contingency fee agreements, 10.7 and 10.8. So I'm continuing to scroll. Hopefully everybody now sees page here. It's titled Some Things to Consider. So the first question that I asked myself is, can you do it electronically in the first place? Contingency fee agreements are governed by 10.7 and 10.8 of the Rules of Court. In Alberta, we have legislation called the Electronic Transactions Act, which is a quick read. So have a look at it. I've provided a link in this sample. It says basically that you can do things electronically in Alberta, and that is separate from the ministerial orders and notices to the assessment and so on. This has been around for some time now. I haven't been able to dig deep on judicial consideration of some of the provisions. However, on my review of this, I've come to the conclusion personally that a contingency fee agreement is likely caught by this legislation such that, yes, you can do it electronically. That said, you still have to comply with the rules. One of the rules on a contingency fee agreement is that there be an affidavit of execution attesting that you saw this client sign. How do you basically do an affidavit of execution? You're not asking the client to swear an affidavit. Rather, you're doing the affidavit of execution, having seen your client sign the appropriate document. I have not come across any guidelines specifically for documents such as a contingency fee agreement. However, there is a ministerial order that talks about how you can attest to witnessing documents that have to do with land titles. So I've borrowed from that. In the sample here, I've given you a link to that Law Society frequently asked questions, from which you can access the ministerial order, and I've put some sample wording for attestation of an instrument from that ministerial order. My theory is that if it's good enough for land titles, then it should be good enough for my contingency fee agreement. So have a look there at my comments. The next requirement that I want to touch upon for your contingency fee agreement is, well, you got to serve the thing. How are you going to do that? You're going to send somebody over to knock on your poor client's door during this pandemic? I'm not. So what do you do? The rules of court govern service of documents, and I've put 3 rules there that I thought were relevant. 11.3 says that you can serve if there is an explicit agreement with the parties to the document. 11.20 is your general service rule with the rules of court. And 11.21 is, well, how do you serve with electronic means? So review those rules. What I've concluded at the end and what I'll be doing for these many, many new clients that are coming my way during the pandemic, fingers crossed, I suppose, I'm going to amend my contingency fee agreement so that there is a provision in there saying that I can serve it by email upon the client. And I have some sample wording right at the bottom here, which hopefully you're seeing on your screen as well, okay? And I've also given you a link to a case that I found. It's Justice Brooker, who went through quite some detail on contingency fee agreements and technical requirements and so on. So consider doing something similar. I mean, otherwise you're serving in the ordinary way. Service is relevant because they have a 5-day cool-off period. The client does, and also service is required within 10 days of the contingency fee agreement being signed. On that point, keep in mind that we do have a suspension of time until June 1, according to one of the ministerial orders, but I don't want to rely on that if I don't have to. So that's the letter. Let me stop sharing. I hope that was useful. I think I may have taken extra time. I'll pass it over to you, Donna. Thank you.